just like that. Here we are live with Chris Naro. Chris is a licensed realtor and co-founder of Montana Real Estate Consultants. So Chris, welcome to the podcast. We're really excited to have you.
Kyle, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about what you're doing with this podcast. It's a great value to new home buyers and anyone looking to find more information in their area.
Cool.
So thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah. And this is cool doing it virtually. You're there in Bozeman. I'm here in Missoula, Montana. Two markets they're pretty high right now in terms of first-time home buyers. And we hear a lot here in Missoula, it's really high. I'm going to wait for it to drop a little bit, or, saving 20% on a $300,000 home is unrealistic right now. So I guess before we get into kind of your path into real estate, I just wanted to start right off with that question. Like, what sort of advice would you have for somebody in a market that is pretty high, I guess, and in the state of Montana or elsewhere when they're looking to get into their first home?
Absolutely. Well, the value aspect aside, I'd say number one is get representation, whether that be a licensed realtor, a real estate agent, or even a legal attorney, or someone that you can rely on there to represent you and go about the deal, take the liability out of the equation in a lot of cases. And in a very similar regard with legal counsel, although real estate agents aren't technically legal counsel, taking that liability off of the negotiation in any case, whether it be a $250,000 home or a $800,000 property, it is always best to have someone representing you in a way that can take the liability off and really take the pressure off of all of the things that have to go in checklist with looking at a property and all the way until closing, which is a lot. What you talk about is taking everything till closing and finding out what those steps are, how to negotiate and navigate those. And so I'd say number one is get representation. And then also communicate with that representation provider. Let them know what you're looking for, what price point, especially like you were saying in Bozeman's high value market. It's important to realize what you can afford right off the bat. So that is number three, is get with a lender early, get pre-qualified, get pre-approved, because those things are going to help you in the, putting in an offer. If you want to get into a property early, if you see something you fall in love with, in some cases, unfortunately, it's something that you're vastly underqualified for. So, you want to make sure that is out of the way first. And then get representation, or your representation may require you to get pre-qualified before they even look for properties for you. So that's paramount, is getting that done. That way, from day one, you and your agent, or you and your legal counsel, whoever's helping you in this negotiation, let's say it is a realtor or real estate agent, the way they look for those properties is zeroing in on exact statistics that what you are looking for. So being honest right up front with that representation is step two after getting representation.
Yeah. Those are great tips, sort of getting started. You mentioned getting representation, getting someone in your court. We talk a lot about building your team. You talk about your journey in real estate and how you went from maybe having someone that needed a team to now part of many teams who are looking to get their first home or their second home or an investment property, and what interested you in getting started in the real estate world.
Certainly. So the way I got started was actually a musician friend of mine here in Bozeman named Adam Greenberg. And he's actually another co-founder of the Montana Real Estate Consultants. And he got it in my head that, real estate is about personal branding, personal marketing, similar to what we do in the music industry when we book gigs for ourselves, when we're communicating with people to book new venues. We're representing ourselves as a independent contractor, as someone that is the professional performing, as well as the one booking and negotiating the contract, everything. So, and in addition to that, of course, like the marketing, you also have public awareness through that, as well as other social media aspects and things like that that are widely available, and is a great tool nowadays. But I got in basically talking to him saying that I've always been interested in real estate and business, and basically helping people to their potential, whether that be financial, personal, physical, any sort of those aspects that people can build off of in life really fascinated me. So uh, um, when it comes to real estate, and like you were saying, those people trying to come into their first investment, or maybe even experienced home buyers, or people that invest very, very frequently in real estate, um, the fascination for me came down to how you can build equity and really create a cash flow, especially in a market where there are a lot of residential lease opportunities, such as Bozeman. When the property values are going up, people will leverage their payment and their mortgage in a new property,
Hmm.
and get that cash flow, which can really help in life, and has transformed a lot of people's lives. Is not only saving their money from their income, but also making money on top of that by investing in real estate and other um, assets, which I know is another question we're going to come to. But viewing that as an asset that can be um, very beneficial to one's financial portfolio, as well as anyone's you know uh, financial goals in general, just to be
Yeah.
independent, have something that they can say that they own, and can create them a financial freedom or a path to wealth that not a lot of things can these days.
Right. Yeah, path to wealth is interesting, especially for first-time home buyers when they look at
Yeah,
their current salaries and they talk with their lender and they say, "Here's how much house you can afford." And it always happens, doesn't it, that the house that you fall in love with is just above that affordability meter that your lender told you, here's where you'd probably be comfortable at your current salary. And I think a lot of
sure.
people make the mistake, or maybe not a mistake, of uh, setting that bar high and getting into a house that maybe they can't afford, but hopefully they can sort of grow into affording, uh, but find themselves sort of strapped with this mortgage and not feeling like they're accumulating wealth, but instead are house poor. We've heard that phrase before. Do you have any
Yeah.
advice for, when you're working with first time home buyers and they're looking at properties that might be outside their price range? Are those conversations that you have as a realtor, or do you sort of leave that up to the lender to decide, or do you leave it up to the people who you're showing the house to be like, well, if you think you can afford it, you can afford it?
Yeah, it's tough in those situations to really be again, legal counsel's kind of a place we try to stay away from. But we
Yeah.
can, advise people to make an educated decision. So when we look at the numbers, especially right off the bat with a lender, you'll know what you can afford. But as an agent myself, I usually try to stay within like a 10% um,
Hmm.
afforded overage for
Yeah.
that kind of top range. So when we look at a property that maybe, let's say, at the minimum $50,000 above what they can afford, negotiation can take a chunk out of that. But in a
Hmm.
lot of cases, the houses are priced correctly, and that could be already 20% below market value for that property. So there's not a lot of leverage there as far as negotiating that price. And like I said, in some cases, the maximum um, $150,000 over what they can afford. And in a lot of cases, people are going to say or realize we can't afford this, and if we get into this, the mortgage payment's too much anyhow. The principal and the pay down, the interest will be too much,
Hmm.
and like you said, being house poor. I mean, what's the benefit of having a property that is over your means and over your income level, that the lender basically laid out for you would be
Yeah.
a comfortable range. So my recommendation is get into a range where you can kind of overshoot your expectations a little bit financially,
Hmm.
but within a comfortable range. If you have an income that says you can only afford a $450,000 house, then looking at $100,000 properties wouldn't be that much of a stretch, especially with negotiation, like I said.
Yeah.
Um,
And a
but
30-year
definitely,
mortgage, it's like, hey, that
right,
you're
right.
spreading that out over a good amount of time.
Absolutely. So being locked into that kind of upper market, or excuse me, upper valued properties above what you can afford, I would say stay under $50,000. That's usually the negotiation range.
Okay.
With prices in Bozeman, we're seeing around a 92% of asking price, with the offers coming in, and sold properties reflecting that as well. So that's something to realize as well.
Very cool. I think that's great advice, being in a spot where you might be able to look at a home that's above what your lender is recommending. But again, I think it comes back to, just like you were saying, your team and your representation. If you have a lender that is, you know, that knows their stuff, they'll be able to point you in the direction and say, here's what you can be expected to pay. And then it does, in a lot of cases, come down to, well, what decision do you want to make? What risk do you want to take on? And what do you think the trajectory of your current career is? Or even, is this a forever home, and what's happening in and around your area? Like, are homes appreciating rapidly?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, if you think, hey, this is a good investment because we're paying a little bit above on our property, but in 5 years, we believe our property could be worth X. So those are some things to take into
Yes.
account as well. Um,
Absolutely.
I think it'd be fun to talk about the asset versus liability question. And I would imagine that as a
Yeah.
realtor, you have some thoughts on this. You know the real estate business, obviously, really well. So when you hear people ask the question, is real estate, my first home, a single family home? I've heard financial gurus call it a liability. So do you have any thoughts on that? Is a home an asset or a liability?
Uh, that's an interesting question, and it's something that a lot of people will say is both. Property will
Yeah.
be both, and it depends on what standpoint you're looking at the property from. Is it a legal or a financial standpoint? If it's from a financial standpoint, I would say it depends. If you have a loan that you're really over leveraged and you only have maybe 10% equity, I would say that definitely you have liability, because when we're looking at equity, again, equity is your property value minus your liabilities, which in this case is your loan. And when you're looking at that from that financial standpoint, if you are, um, you know, if your equity in a $400,000 house, your loan's 250, you essentially have an equity of 150.
Yeah.
And so you have a little bit less uh, equity there. So your liability is a little bit more so than if you had a higher down payment. Let's say you had a higher property value of like $800,000. Well, in those higher loan amounts, you'll see down payments of 20%. So in an $800,000 home at 20%, that's $160,000 equity. So if you are in that position, purchasing that equity and getting a higher percentage equity off the bat is always a great thing. But
Hmm.
having lower liability is always a better thing financially. Now, if you're looking at it from a legal standpoint, let's say you have a property. We've all heard someone walked across my property and twisted their ankle or broke their leg falling into a
Right.
hole, and now I'm getting sued.
Right.
That there's definitely a liability there that you won't have to worry about if you're in a rental
A
or an
rental.
apartment where it's not really your liability outside of your unit or outside of the property complex or what have you. So I think it definitely depends on the position you're looking at it from. I think it can also be, when we're talking about liability, a property can be turned into more of an asset as it cash flows if you transfer that liability onto another person. And let's say you turn your older property, you get into a newer house, you have a mortgage on the newer house, you turn your older property into a residential lease. Now that financial liabilities, of course, moved on to the other person, in between
Hmm.
them and really the bank, which is the owner of the risk involved in that loan. So there's the other two aspects you can look at it from is at a financial standpoint, from a loan standpoint. that risk is taken on by the bank in between you and the bank, that you will have that continuous income that will afford you to pay that mortgage every month. And the difference with a legal standpoint is, let's say, that going back to that residential lease, that
Yeah.
person is occupying and paying for that property now, but someone breaks their leg out in the front porch of that or out on the front lawn. Uh, the person getting sued is still the owner, so you're still taking on that legal liability there. And
Right.
just going back to touch on the asset risk, once that property cash flows, it's like going back to our residential lease option. Transferring that financial liability between now the bank and that new person paying your mortgage, that would then, I guess, transfer at least a portion of the equity of that property into an asset, and more of an asset than a liability for the owner.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point and a good sort of way to chat about that conversation. I just think it's really an interesting topic, and it's cool to hear some expert advice as a response. So thanks. Uh, can you help us understand a market like Bozeman? Why is a market like Bozeman so expensive? If I'm a first-time home buyer and I'm in an area where I'm looking at homes thinking, I'm making $30,000 a year or $35,000 a year, like I may never own a home. I might have to rent the rest of my life in this market. How does that happen? What do economists say is going on in that market?
Yes. So Bozeman, we're experiencing a lot of uncontrolled growth. And it's kind of, I have the analogy, it's kind of like a teenager, right? Or let's say even before that, like pre-puberty, I just want
Hmm.
to be an adult. I want to be a grown up so bad. I just wanted to
Right.
skip ahead 20 years. So it's kind of like, Bozeman's realizing so much growth and attraction from people from out of state, coming from California and the like, that are looking at rental property, vacation rentals, or just moving here from out of state.
Yeah.
We're getting so much interest that a lot of these people are realizing, especially putting up new properties, that we can charge anywhere in the high realm from 900 to some cases going to be $1,500 a month for
Wow.
rent.
Wow.
And that's definitely the upper range. And then the other aspect that's adding to this is a lot of these people that do own these fourplexes and let's say multiple door rental properties are realizing that these people are coming in and looking for more of a high echelon condo or
Mm,
townhouse or even just apartment, and they're putting in thousands, tens of thousands, in some case hundreds of thousands of dollars in renovations and rehab,
wow.
to where they can charge another $500 of rent. So going back to the home ownership viewpoint, let's say it's you're saving $1,400, you're $1,400 in your mortgage payment
Yeah.
every month. Coming off of that, even just the 1,500, that's still 1,200 a year over 5 to 8 years of people owning the property, usually moving after 8 years. That's almost $10,000. So I mean, that's enough in itself to make you realize, I could be gaining a lot of financial freedom from this, and also making money on top of my savings.
Yeah.
Going back to building the equity, there's a lot of people that don't realize, and I've actually put out a video about this, is a lot of cases that, like we were just saying, the rent payment will be $200 to $300 above what their potential mortgage payment would be in an actual house. So,
Wow.
just realizing that in some cases in Bozeman can unlock a lot of possibilities for
Yeah.
you to step into home ownership before you may feel like you're financially ready.
Yeah. Getting those tools and getting some of that knowledge. Like, I think a lot of first time homebuyers don't quite know what a mortgage looks like. Uh, I've been renting all my life. It's easy. I cut a check to my property manager or the building owner, and not
Yeah.
knowing that, hey, that check that you write each month for the last 10 years, if you'd bundle that into a mortgage, you'd be 10 years into a mortgage and actually have another 10K in the bank.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing to realize is, you're paying rent to someone, they're paying a mortgage. It's simple as that. So,
Yeah.
looking at it from the outside is, I think, the best tool is, your tax benefits. Someone that's renting, they're not going to enjoy any claim for a tax break that a property owner would. You can't
Mhm.
claim for a mortgage interest reduction. You can't claim for a property tax deduction.
Right.
And, in a lot of cases, in almost every case, housing costs are usually very, very similar month to month. They don't change.
Mhm.
And your rent in a rental property is going to increase year to year, guaranteed. And in Bozeman, we're seeing sometimes bi-monthly, and it's going up
Oh,
two,
wow.
$300, depending on those. Like I was saying, those reno projects where people are taking a lot of time and money to renovate those properties are really asking a premium when those people do move in, or those current renters stay on their lease. So
Yeah.
definitely looking at it from a tax break standpoint as well as that mortgage standpoint, you're getting a lot of benefits that a renter just doesn't enjoy because they're simply not the owner of the property. That's the only difference. And then the other big difference is you're getting a whole house in comparison to, let's say, a 400 to 600 square foot, one bedroom,
Right.
small kitchen, little apartment studio
Yeah.
thing.
Totally.
So
With a yard, and if you have a dog, hey, goodbye pet fees, right? You have a yard.
yeah, and God forbid you're on the third floor of a complex and you got a dog. You got to take it down every
Right.
20 minutes, 3 floors just to
Oh,
do its business. So that's a
exactly.
pain in itself.
Yes. Yes. Um, well, I think it's a good time to jump into our segment, which we lovingly call closing time, where we ask our guests a couple questions that we try to keep consistent, though it does vary based on who we're talking with. Uh,
Okay.
so, Chris, can you help a first-time home buyer with some financial advice? What piece of financial advice would you have for somebody who's looking to save up that down payment, but feels like it's many miles away and perhaps many years away?
Yeah, like I was saying, get with a lender early. Yeah, even if you're not looking for a property, just meet with one and see what you can afford and what's really realistic for you. Um, Going back to our question about, should we look at properties that are over list or over our financial comfortability level? I would
Mhm.
say that's your best tool, is getting with a lender and having a professional go
Yeah.
over your credit, your income, every single fractionable margin and metric they can pay attention to that will point you in the right direction. And then, when you're going into making an offer, and even before that, you're getting your inspection. That's another thing right off the bat of this video I actually didn't mention is get an inspection every
Yeah.
time, even if it's a new property. You'll have new properties. We actually saw one here in Bozeman where the builders will, or the manufacturers in this case, will have a 1-year manufacturer warranty. If anything goes wrong, they come back and fix it. That's their usual spiel.
Right.
But people will get into a house that's brand new, and they'll find after 2 or 3 years their shingle roof has a huge defect in it, and there's a leak happening
Ugh.
that's been going down their siding for 2 years. So, and by that time, like I said, it's a 1-year manufacturer warranty. These things won't arise until usually 2, 3 years later.
Right. Right.
And so, in a shingle roof, and we're talking about a shingle roof here, that's like a 25-year guaranteed, lifetime
Yeah.
lifespan. So when you're 2, 3 years after and you have a problem with that, that's a huge deal. And so
Yep.
that's a thing that'll save you a lot of money, is getting that inspection, and then also knowing how to fix things on your property. I feel like
Mm.
men and women of today have kind of lost that interest to fix something. If it's broken, I'll throw it out, or if it needs repair, I'll call an expert.
Yeah.
And in a lot of situations, you can fix something on the very cheap and save a lot of money over time with the upkeep of your property that
Yeah.
another person will just, let's say we're going back to the roof thing. Let's say you have a leak in your roof. Most people today will just call a roofer, have them come over, they'll pay them for the consultation, and then they'll recommend a new roof or a new section
Yep.
or new shingles in that area, which in any rate is going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
When the average home buyer, the homeowner, doesn't realize they can just go to Lowe's and get a $7 or $8 gallon of wet patch, Henry's wet
Right.
patch, and fix it themselves. So
Yeah.
those are great tools too. Us agents, we look at it a lot of times from the outside. We get you into the property, and of course we keep in touch, and we still are your friends, and we love you afterwards. But getting in touch with people that can help you with those kind of those smaller tasks. And another thing is the internet is huge. I mean, go on
Yeah.
YouTube, be like, type in, I have a mold problem in my ceiling, like what's going on. And even before you call up an expert, you can see, there's multiple ways you can kind of remedy that. And if not, you'll know and
Right.
be able to go to an expert with a little more information, a little more insight on what's happening.
Yeah, I love that piece of advice. Like, hey, roll up the sleeves a little bit. Once you're in the property, this is a good way to save some money and put it in the bank instead of
Absolutely.
put it in a contractor's pockets. We
Certainly. And then also know when to not do that, and know when it's over your head and you should call a professional and
totally,
not cause damage to your own property. So that's
yes.
another thing too.
My wife and I were very busy. We have a rental property, and the washer and dryer the dryer had stopped working, and it had stopped working once before. And I went in and got it working again, just kind of figured out the plug, and it stopped a second time. And so we called a contractor, and they have $100 show up fee. So, if it takes them 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour, that $100 is right there. And
Hmm.
they flipped on the breaker, and it started working again. So we paid
Yeah.
someone $120 to show up and switch a breaker. I'm like, well, I guess we're
Yep.
never going to be too busy to see if it's the breaker ever again. So that's good.
Yeah. That's so funny you mentioned washer and dryer, because we actually had a recently, I was looking through this article, and there was a guy, I think it was in California, where they have a lot of electric cars. And it's funny that you mentioned the washer dryer. This guy bought a property, and he had a Tesla, and he wanted to have a handyman come by, an electrical engineer, and wire one of the quick chargers into his garage.
Hmm.
The 220-volt whatever plug, and it
Right.
cost him nearly $5,000 to just have a plug put in his garage and wired to the ground power and everything. And a lot of people, again, going back to Lowe's and Home Depot,
$5,000. Yep.
people don't realize that that 220 plug is the same plug as your washer and dryer power.
Uh,
And you can actually put that in for under $20 yourself if you have a screwdriver and a drill.
$5,000.
$5,000
Yep.
for an install for just a plug. So that's another thing, going back to the wet patch. There's so many cheap
Yeah.
options to set your home up for for whatever you need, be it a financial or even just a quick charger, any of those aspects that increase value or provide an attachment to your home that adds value. You
Yeah.
can save so much money doing it yourself in the right applications.
Yeah.
So that was another thing I remembered from that. That was too funny.
Yeah, that's great. And even before you're in a home, ways to save money with DIY projects, things like your car. Hey, troubleshoot it. And a lot of times it might be things that, yes, an expert needs to take a look at so you don't lose a finger, but sometimes
Yeah.
you can solve it. And so it's worth doing some YouTubing
Yeah.
and Google searching for sure.
Mhm.
Chris, how can people find out more about you? I know, you've got a few ventures going on. The Montana Real Estate Consultant Group sounds like a really cool project happening. Tell us a little bit about that
Yeah.
and who's your ideal kind of clientele.
Yeah. Our ideal client is really anyone looking for any help in real estate. We can help even people outside of Montana and all the other 49 states.
Cool.
We specialize in everything from new home buyers to people relocating for business to commercial sales to land. So we really do it all. We're, like I said, a 4-person team. We're very lean. We're really mean. And we have the tools and knowledge to help a lot of people. In fact, our experience level among all 4 of us totals about over 30-40 years. So
It's amazing.
it's really, really awesome. We actually have 2 veteran agents in our group and 2 newer agents as well. So but for contact, you can find us on Facebook, Montana Real Estate Consultants. We have a page there.
Okay.
My personal page is Chris Naro. My other page is Chris Naro, co-founder of Montana Real Estate Consultants. But you can just search Drumming Realtor on Facebook, and
Okay.
I'm also at the Drumming Realtor on Instagram. I have a lot of my kind of merge of drumming and real estate, so kind of
Yeah.
mixing the two, making it a little entertaining and a little
Something we
more
didn't talk
personable
too much
than
about is your
yeah.
drumming career, which is awesome. So, uh,
Thank you.
perhaps if they follow you on Instagram, they can see some of your clips and perhaps hire you for a gig here and there here in Montana.
Please do come check it out. And the
Yeah.
easiest way to get a hold of me is of course my cell phone. My number is 406-548-7219. So give me a
Great.
call, shoot me a text, get a hold of me, and I can help you out.
Exciting stuff. We'll make sure to include
Yeah,
that info in the show notes here.
great.
Hopefully you
Thank
don't
you.
get robo dialed by too many people if I put it on the internet, but maybe we'll do like the 4, spell it out, oh 06. So,
Sure, the Craigslist met. Yeah, yeah,
yes, the Craigslist
absolutely.
method. Great. Well, Chris, this has been a real delight. Thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. And we hope you have a successful December here and heading into next quarter. So if you have any
Thank you.
questions out there, listeners, reach out to Chris and he'll help you out.
Thank you so much, guys. Kyle, thanks for having me, man. I can't wait. Maybe we can have another conversation in the future. I know I mentioned this to my team. They were super excited, so maybe we can have a few of them on at some
Yeah,
point in the future. I know they have a lot of value to bring. So
cool.
thanks for what you're doing here. This is, again, such a cool thing that you put on, and I really am a very, very thankful to be a part of it, and I look forward to being a part of it in the future as well.
Yeah, well, thanks for the kind words and have a great day.
Absolutely. See you,
All right.
Kyle.
See ya.
Bye-bye.